I was 18 years old when I first heard about Dark Diaries Read Aloud. I was living in Salvador, Brazil, a city of music and color, but my own life felt gray. Every morning, I rode the crowded bus to school, clutching my notebooks and pretending I belonged. My classmates laughed and joked around me, and I smiled back, but inside I trembled. I had moved from Manila just a year before, chasing my mother's promise of a better future. My accent marked me as other. I was the only Filipino in my grade. At night, I scribbled my fears into a tattered diary hidden beneath my mattress. I called it my dark diary because only in darkness could I write the truth. One rainy afternoon, I scrolled through YouTube, searching for something to fill the emptiness. That's when I stumbled on a video titled Dark Diaries Read Aloud. Episode 1. Curious, I clicked. A calm voice spoke over flickering candlelight. Welcome to Dark Diaries Read Aloud, where we breathe life into hidden fears and forgotten dreams. My heart pounded. The narrator began reading an entry from someone in Cairo who had lost everything in a flood but found strength to rebuild. As I listened, tears rolled down my cheeks. This was more than storytelling, it was confession, healing, and revolution all at once. Over the next week, I tuned into Dark Diaries every evening. I learned about Leila, a 25-year-old from Morocco fighting to finish her university degree despite her family's disapproval. I heard Hassan's tale of overcoming homelessness on the streets of Istanbul, of stealing glances at a library's open door until someone let him inside. With every read aloud moment, the narrator invited us to close our eyes, feel the writer's heartbeat in our hands, and say aloud, "Your voice matters. Even in darkness, you are seen." Those words echoed inside me like a drumbeat I could follow. I began to write more openly in my own diary. I described the fear that knotted my stomach when I tried to speak Portuguese in class, the humiliation when I mangled a sentence and saw my classmates snicker. I wrote about missing my grandmother's cooking, the way her adobo tasted like home, and how Salvador's spicy vatap could never replace it. I wrote about the ache in my throat when I sang along to Brazilian funk but dared not open my mouth in public. Every night, I whispered my entry to the empty room, practicing the act of owning my story. Then came episode 7, Breaking the Silence. The narrator read an entry from a 16-year-old girl in Kiyu who learned to sing again after losing her voice to cancer treatments. The words tumbled out, raw and beautiful. My voice is my protest. My voice is my prayer. My voice is my victory. I pressed replay, clutching my pillow as if it were a lifeline. I realized that if she could reclaim her voice after losing it forever, I could at least try to speak without trembling. The next morning, I carried my diary pages to school. During free period, I approached my classmate Anna, who always sat alone. My palms sweated, but I remembered the narrator's rhythm. Inhale courage, exhale fear. I open my mouth and read one line. I came from far away, and my accent is my story. Anna looked surprised, then nodded. She smiled and said, "That's beautiful." The applause was only in my heart, but it felt like fireworks. I kept writing and reading aloud. With each Dark Diaries episode, I learned a new script, a set of powerful, motivational affirmations woven into every reading. Phrases like "darkness is a canvas for light," "your scars are stars on your map," and "speak, even if your voice shakes" became my personal mantras. I repeated them when I jogged along the bay, when I studied late under the warm glow of a street lamp, when I stared at my reflection before sleep. They no longer belonged solely to the voices in the videos. They sank into my bones. By the time I turned 19, I had posted my own dark diary entry as an anonymous comment under a video. My words described the loneliness of being an outsider, the trembling breath before I spoke in Portuguese, the healing that came when I found others who felt the same. I wrote, "Thank you for reading my darkness aloud, for giving it shape and grace." The narrator replied the next day in the comments, "Your voice shines, keep speaking." I felt as if I had won a medal I could never unsee. Then came the day I decided to volunteer at a local youth center. They wanted someone to lead a story circle where kids could read diaries to each other. I hesitated. What if I stuttered? Froze? But the script from Dark Diaries was there. Fear is the door. Courage is the key. I stepped into the room where 10 teenagers sat in a circle, faces shadowed by doubt. My voice quivered as I introduced myself in Portuguese and English. "My name is Lena. I'm 19 from the Philippines." Then I asked if anyone wanted to share. Silence. Then one boy, an immigrant from Guinea, offered a few lines. His stutter was thicker than mine once was, but he read. The circle grew. Soon everyone shared something small. A fear, a hope, a line. From their dark diary, that afternoon, I realized the narrator's script was no longer just motivational words on a screen. It was a living blueprint for connection. I watched shy teens find their courage, mouths trembling and then steadying as they spoke their truths. I felt the same warmth I had felt in my bedroom at night, the glow of knowing that in speaking, you make loneliness retreat. The story circle became weekly. I adapted the Dark Diary script. We began each session with a breathing exercise: inhale courage, exhale doubt, and closed with the affirmation, "I am both shadow and light." I watched the kids transform. One girl who never spoke at school started telling her story of escaping domestic violence. She looked straight at me, her eyes bright. We applauded in silence, the only sound the hum of the air conditioner. At T20, I auditioned for a small college theater production. I had never acted, but I saw an opportunity to speak on stage, to harness the power of a spoken script. I chose a monologue about a refugee's journey, years of peril and hope crammed into 2 minutes. I rehearsed standing in front of my mirror, saying each line with conviction. Sometimes I felt like I was channeling the narrator of Dark Diaries, calm, firm, compassionate. When I stepped onto the stage, I heard only my own heartbeat and the mantra in my mind, "Your voice is your victory." Afterward, the audience rose in applause. I felt a thrill, but more than that, I felt at home in my own body. By the time I graduated college, I had created my own channel, Lena's Dark Diaries. I combined readings of my own diary entries with guided affirmations. I invited guests, immigrants, survivors, artists to read from their diaries and discuss what it meant to find light in darkness. My first guest was Anna, the girl who listened to my very first reading at 18. She read a poem she wrote about cemeteries feeling like libraries of memories. Her voice was steady. She looked proud. My video description said, "Where darkness lives, stories awaken." It was the tagline borrowed from the original Dark Diary script, but now it belonged to our community. Years later, at 25, I returned to Manila for a visit. I walked through the narrow alleys of my childhood neighborhood, carrying my own diary filled with new entries and scripts. I sat by my grandmother's old dining table and read aloud in Tagalog and English. In every diary lived in darkest hours, there sleeps a spark that waits to ignite. My grandmother smiled, her eyes bright with tears. She said, "Your voice has grown." I realized then how far I had traveled from hiding my words under a mattress in Salvador to sharing them before crowds into continents. Now, at 30, I still carry that first motivational script in my heart. I begin every new chapter of my life with those words. Darkness is a canvas for light. I speak them before every presentation, every interview, every new adventure. I remember the anonymous narrator who breathed life into hidden fears and sparked countless journeys. In my own dark diaries read aloud scripts, I invite others to claim their stories, to transform fear into fuel, to speak even when their voices shake. If you ever find yourself lost in shadow, remember, your diary holds your power. Read it aloud, let the world hear your truth. In that moment, you become both the script and the storyteller. And in the echo of your own voice, you will discover, even in darkness, you are seen. I remember the morning I decided to take my dark diaries mission international. I was 32, settled in Lisbon for a fellowship on storytelling and social change. My inbox was flooded with messages from followers around the world, students in Seoul, nurses in Johannesburg, teachers in Buenos Aires, all yearning to join our next virtual story circle. I booked a flight to Seoul first. Landing at Incheon Airport, I clutched my carry-on, which held nothing but my ever-present diary and a small recorder. The air smelled faintly of pine and cold concrete. Skyscrapers gleamed through the mist. I felt the familiar flutter of nerves would my voice carry across cultures, languages, continents. I opened my diary and whispered, in every whisper, a roar awaits. My event was at a community library in Mapogu. The sign outside read, "Share your darkness, find the light." 20 attendees trickled in. High schoolers in uniform, office workers in crisp suits, a grandmother in a floral hanbok. We began, as always, with a breathing exercise. Inhale courage, exhale doubt. I guided in halting Korean, having learned the phrase for this occasion. Then I shared my own entry, the story of moving from Salvador to Lisbon, of finding a home in words. As I spoke, I saw shoulders relax, eyes brighten, tears gather. A young woman slid from a chair and stood, voice trembling. She read a passage about losing her mother to illness and writing to her in a diary no one would hear until now. After she spoke, the room was silent for a long minute, and then the entire group offered a soft, collective applause. In that moment, I realized stories did more than connect us. They could heal across 10,000 miles. Back in Lisbon, I expanded the YouTube channel into a full-fledged platform. I recruited translators and voice actors to bring entries to life in a dozen languages. Each week, we release Global Dark Diaries, featuring stories from remote corners of the world. An elder in rural Mongolia recounting her first days of literacy at 70, a young teacher in Bangladesh surviving a cyclone, a gay couple in Warsaw surviving prejudice. The production team wove in subtle animations, lines of text appearing like glowing lanterns against dark backgrounds. We ended each episode with the familiar affirmations, "Your scars are stars on your map," echoing in every tongue. Subscribers soared past 100,000, but numbers mattered less than the messages we received. A note from someone in Peru who said our reading stopped her hand from shaking as she signed her adoption papers. A letter from a prisoner in Oregon who said our videos were the only light in his cell. Even as the platform grew, I returned again and again to the simple, intimate ritual of the story circle. I hosted pop-up events in a subway car in Tokyo during off hours, in the rainforests of Costa Rica under a canopy of ferns, on a floating library boat on the Thames. Each location lent its own ambience. The rattle of trains beneath Tokyo Station, the chorus of howler monkeys above my head, the gentle lapping of water against wooden planks. The prompt was always the same. Share one line from your diary that kept you awake at night. I watched as participants navigated language barriers, translating on the fly, relying on body language, on shared emotion. A teenager in Tokyo spoke in English, then in Japanese, then used her phone's translation app. An elderly German woman recited in broken Spanish. Together, they showed me that the script I had once whispered to myself, speak, even if your voice shakes, was universal. At 35, I encountered my greatest test. A well-known influencer accused us of exploiting trauma for views. She posted a viral video criticizing the readings as voyeuristic, the productions as commodifying pain. Comments on our channel turned vicious. Therapy porn, emotional exploitation. My heart sank. For days, I could not bring myself to open my diary. I tried to remember the affirmations, but each phrase felt hollow. Then I received an email from a survivor of domestic violence in rural India. She wrote, "When you read my story, I felt valued. I felt safe." And another from a refugee camp in Jordan, "Your words gave me courage to teach my children to read." I realized that any platform with reach would attract criticism, but the voices we had amplified, the connections we had forged, were real. I posted a response video, not defensive, but reflective. I spoke in front of a simple backdrop, without animations or music. "I hear your concerns," I began. "We started this project because no one should suffer in silence. We do not profit from trauma. We honor it. If you feel we have failed, tell us how to do better." I invited the critic and our community to a live dialogue. A dialogue ensued, sometimes heated, often humbling. We discussed consent protocols, anonymization, support resources. We brought therapists and community leaders onto a panel. Over 6 months, we revised our guidelines, obtaining written consent, offering counseling referrals, including trigger warnings, providing honoraria. To contributors, the backlash subsided, respect returned. More importantly, we had grown, as individuals and as a community, by facing our shadows. Today, at 38, I look at the archive of dark diaries, thousands of entries spanning continents and causes. Each story is a pebble in a vast mosaic pain. Resilience, joy, creativity. I've become the curator of this living anthology, but I am also one of its participants. Last month, I recorded my own newest entry, about the day I learned my grandmother in Manila had passed away. I wrote of my grief, my regret at not visiting sooner, and my gratitude for the generations of storytellers who taught me that love persists beyond death. I recorded it in Tagalog, English, and Portuguese, layering my own voice with the voices of the friends who had read for me in Salvador. When I speak the line, even in grief, "Your story saves you," I feel a warmth in my chest. Tomorrow, I'll fly to Nairobi for the United Nations World Storytelling Summit. They've asked me to give a keynote on story as catalyst for social healing. I'll begin by reading an entry from a Syrian teacher I met in Beirut, whose diary describes rebuilding a school from concrete rubble. Then I'll share my own journey from Manila to Salvador to Lisbon and beyond, each step powered by the belief that darkness is only a canvas for our stories of light. I'll close with the script that started it all, inviting 10,000 delegates to breathe together. Inhale courage, exhale doubt. If I speak well, maybe my words will seed new story circles in refugee camps, prisons, small villages, all places where darkness and light intersect. And so the story goes on, not just in my diary, but in every heart that dares to write under the cover of night and read aloud by dawn. To you, wherever you are, in a dorm room, a rain-soaked alley, a crowded office, know this: your diary holds your power. Your words can cross oceans. They can ignite revolutions of empathy. They can build bridges between strangers. If you ever doubt, open your diary, read one line in a whisper, then beneath the quiet, find your roar. In that voice, you become both script and storyteller, and in the echo of your truth, the world awakens. At the summit's closing gala, I stood beneath a vaulted ceiling of lanterns, each one representing a story shared over the past 24 hours. Delegates from 60 nations swayed to a gentle melody as I lifted the microphone. My heart thumped, not with fear, but with gratitude. I began in Arabic, then switched to English, then Tagalog, and finally Portuguese, the languages that had carried me through my life's journey. This is for every hidden diary, I said, voice steady. For every secret whispered in the dark. May your words find light, and may your light guide others home. Afterward, as the orchestra played, I slipped away to the terrace overlooking Nairobi's skyline. I opened my diary to a blank page and wrote, "Today, I witnessed the power of stories to unite strangers across oceans. Tonight, I rest in the knowledge that our voices, once silenced, now sing together." I closed my eyes and imagined the flicker of candles in distant time zones, from a hut in rural Mongolia to an apartment in Buenos Aires, each one marking a reader who felt seen. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Beirut, where I would co-host a workshop for Syrian refugees rebuilding their community school. I plan to bring along a portable recorder and ask every child to read one sentence from their diaries into it. Those recordings would become Voices of Tomorrow, a special series we'd release on the platform to remind the world that even in the most devastated places, hope takes shape through words. As we taxied on the runway, I thought back to 18-year-old Lena on that Salvador bus, trembling with every Portuguese word she had to speak. I thought of the girl in Kiyu who sang her way back to life, the grandmother in Mongolia learning letters at 70, the Syrian teacher rebuilding classrooms with a pen in hand. I realized that while the faces, languages, and circumstances had always changed, the core truth remained. When we dare to articulate our darkness, we invite light both within ourselves and in others. My hands had long since healed from the trembling of youth, but I still carried that first mantra in my palm: speak, even if your voice shakes. And as the engines roared to life, I pressed my hand to my heart and whispered the closing script I'd learned so many years ago. Darkness is a canvas for light. Your story is the brush. Then I leaned back against the seat, ready for the next chapter knowing that no matter where the journey led, the story would always continue, so long as someone, somewhere, dared to read aloud. We touched down in Beirut just as the afternoon sun softened against the crumbling concrete facades. The refugee camp lay beyond a maze of dusty lanes, children darting between makeshift homes patched with tarps. I carried my recorder and a stack of blank notebooks bound in colorful fabric. At the entrance to the community school, a long, low building with a hand-painted sign, I paused to steady my breath. A group of 10 to 12-year-olds waited for me under a tin awning, clutching tattered journals. Edit them in halting Arabic and English, then introduce the exercise. Each child would read one sentence from their diary, and I would record it. Nervous giggles rippled through the group. I asked for volunteers. A slender boy with wide eyes stepped forward first. He flipped to the last page of his notebook and read softly. I dream of a day when my home is more than a memory. I pressed record on the device, then thanked him with a thumbs up. One by one, a girl in a bright hijab read about missing her sister's laugh. Another boy shared a line about the taste of fresh bread he longed for. A small girl in paint-stained shoes read a single word, hope, and grinned shyly. When they finished, I played back the recordings so they could hear themselves. Voices wavering, but proud. That evening, I sat by a kerosene lamp in my guest tent and compiled the clips into a montage for Voices of Tomorrow, Beirut. Over gentle oud music, each child's voice blended into a tapestry of longing and resilience. At the end, I layered in our mantra, "Your words are seeds. Plant them without fear." I uploaded the video before dawn and watched as comments poured in, teachers offering support, donors pledging school supplies, volunteers signing up to help rebuild. But most important were the messages from parents in the camp. My daughter listened and smiled for the first time in months. My son's English improved because he practiced reading aloud at night. In those notes, I saw the proof that reading dark diaries could spark light in both writer and listener. A week later, I joined a small circle of mothers in a shaded courtyard. They cradled their journals like lifelines, entries in broken Arabic, French, and English. We sat cross-legged on woven mats, passing the recorder from hand to hand. When they finished, a hush fell over us. One woman, her face framed by silver-streaked hair, spoke of the shame she felt after losing everything, but how writing made her feel human again. Another mother shared a poem about her child's first laugh after months of fear. Tears glistened in our collective silence. I pressed my palm to my heart, feeling the resonance of our shared humanity. As I prepared to leave Beirut, I walked through the camp one last time. A group of children chased pigeons across a dusty courtyard while a teacher waved from a classroom doorway. I handed her a box of fresh notebooks and a small speaker loaded with our Voices of Tomorrow playlist. She promised to play the recordings every morning before class. I smiled, imagining the ripple effect. A song of resilience greeting each new day. On the flight back to Lisbon, I opened my diary and scribbled the final lines of this chapter. In a city scarred by conflict, I found stories that rebuilt bridges and hearts. Each voice, once trapped in darkness, now sings into the world. I paused and added beneath it, "The canvas grows ever larger, and there remain millions of pages yet to fill." Back at my desk, I leaned into the microphone and recorded a new introduction. For Global Dark Diaries, where darkness gathers, we kindle light, one story, one voice, one listener at a time. As the words left my lips, I felt the same thrill I had felt in Salvador so many years ago. The journey was far from over. Somewhere, someone was scribbling their own dark diary entry, even now, perhaps in a mountain hamlet, a city slum, a cramped apartment, or a lonely hospital bed. I imagined them poised over the page, heart in hand, fingers trembling as they considered the truth they longed to share, and I knew I would be there, ready to read their words aloud, to breathe life into their darkness, to build community from their courage, to remind them and everyone who listens that even the faintest whisper can ignite a blaze. For as long as there is ink to spill and ears to hear, the story of Dark Diaries Read Aloud will continue endless, boundless, and alive, with the power of human voices unafraid to speak.